and then it goes off at 5 or 4:30 when people are supposed to close. So I mean, so that we know there is nothing to be alarmed about. We are in a safe place. So we will spend the next 1 hour or thereabouts thinking through this topic. We will talk about the question of causation and why we think it is such a big issue in this training. And by the time we finish, we want to be able to differentiate between descriptive and causal research. That is fairly simple. We should be able to talk about the concept of cause within a research context and describe or discuss different causal notions and their implications or applications for modern research, and then talk about general ways of analyzing a cause. We will deal with the first two in this session, and after lunch, the 1 hour after lunch, we will deal with the other part. We're hoping that, well, so this is another way of stating the outcomes. But let's go on straight to work. So generally speaking, we have two types of research in the social sciences, in the humanities generally. There is the descriptive type of research, and there is the causal type of research. And you would agree, I mean, we know that each of these calls for a different kind of thinking, a different kind of design, a different kind of analysis, and a different kind of inference. Sometimes problem begins when the design is descriptive, and then the findings are sounding like causal, and then the inferences are sounding like discausal, if there is anything like that, merging descriptive and causal together. I mean, I don't know. So it's it can be a problem, and I think this problem occurs because people don't even remember, if they ever knew, that these are two kinds of research, and that the way we go about them, once we start on one note, so we have to remain loyal to that note up to the end. But then again, you know, Susan talked about trained incapacity, borrowing across disciplines, and so on and so forth. We also want to be flexible about this. We need to know this. We need to know then we also need to know if there is, you know, we want to run away as much as possible from making some of these ideas look like laws that really cannot be bent. So we have these two, but we need to ask, I want to know which of these has been your main kind of research, going back to the research that you have done. Which one have you done more than the other? Okay, descriptive, I think for most of us is descriptive. Huh? Descriptive simply says, this is what exists. This is what we see. I see people at Dandora adapting to their environment. That is description. I see that men are quicker to adapt than women. That is description. I see that there are more young people on Dandora dump site than we have on Ngong dump site, which is another serious dump site in Kenya, where I have also done field work with my colleagues. So all of that is just description. But then Causa says, I can see that this, is the reason that exists. In other words, this is the cause of that, or this is the product of that. And you see, which one do you think requires a lot more work? The causal, isn't it? Because I am telling people, you can stake your life on this. And that I am very sure, and on and on and on. But we don't want to go away with the impression that descriptive and causal are always fighting and they never meet. You see, this is where the problem sometimes is. We teach this kind of thing with so much evangelistic zeal that people think you have to swear allegiance to descriptive and stay on that road forever, or you have to swear allegiance. We even make laws about it. We don't do causal study because we don't, in our tradition, we don't. It shouldn't be like that. Let me ask you a question. What is the cause? When a system stops to work, what usually causes it, right? Don't say it out. Don't say it out. When a system stops working, what usually causes it? Write it somewhere where you can easily cross it out in case you are not happy with your answer. When a system stops working, what usually causes it? Write the answer.
The question is not clear.
Just answer it. Okay, write electricity. Write electricity there now. You've written it. This cohort is likely to be one of the smartest cohorts on the surface of the earth. Did you remember the question you asked me? Which system? You want me to do what? To describe. Then you can begin to say, this is the cause. We cannot do good descriptive causal research where there is no good descriptive research. So I was joking with Susan. Yesterday I went somewhere on our campus and I was supposed to do a mock presentation. And they asked me, bring out your system. I said, hey, wait. The reproductive system or the respiratory system or the... I mean, I don't mind, but I mean, if I'm going to bring out the reproductive system, it has to be in the toilet. They said, no, we mean computer. I said, yeah, you see, now, you have to tell me exactly what you mean. And we're going to spend some time just talking about concept formation sometime later. The danger in just assuming that everybody understands what we are talking about is always there. So the point I'm making is there are descriptive studies, there are causal studies, yeah, but we cannot do causal studies if the situation has not been described. How can we say democracy brings better economy if we don't agree on what democracy means? What really does it mean? Is Nigeria a democracy? Is Rwanda a democracy? Is Uganda not a democracy? It is. Yeah, are they the same? You know? So description, we need to understand what we are talking about before we can say this is what it causes or this is what causes it. The second point that you have taught me here is that most of us have always been on the descriptive plane. And you went ahead and said, maybe it is because it is a lot easier to describe than to explain this is the cause of that, right? I have been running this same training with 3 of my colleagues in Lagos, but I'm the only Nigerian among the 3. And almost every day, one person is complaining about stomach upset. So we say, okay, let's begin to do regression analysis. All right, so today we'll ask for food without pepper. Then we asked. And then somebody is running to the toilet an hour after. Okay, his problem is not with the... Let's ask for food without oil. So they put pepper, then no oil. Then 2 people are running to the... I mean, so establishing causality can be really, really tough. But then to say, how many people had stomach upset? 3, 2, 1, none. It's easier, right? But if that is the case, why don't I stay forever on the descriptive plane. We will talk about why we need causal studies in the next couple of slides. Why do you have to bother our head about that? But here, we will first talk about, I'm sure the distinction and the connection, not just the distinction, between these two types of studies are clear now, yeah? Yeah. And we can have this in any discipline that we have chosen. Whether it's sociology or political science or political economy or media studies, whatever, or agricultural economics, we have descriptive studies there, we have causal studies there. But there are conditions. Just as you can see now, I did say, and well, you were the one that started it, that we need rich description before we can do causation. So there are conditions under which we choose what type of work we do. And one way of looking at it is just to say, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So how much do we know right now? There are situations where the issue we are dealing with has been fully theorized. And the theory, the explanations, by theory I mean the broad explanations, seem to explain the phenomenon we're explaining very well. There are other situations where, I'm seeing A, B, C, and D scattered all over the world, all over the place. I can't find any theory that is holding this together for me. Situation number 3 is where there is plenty of data there. Data is available, and we can spin this around and make studies with it. But then there are also situations, which let's call situation 4, where data is not available. Now, before I can say I want to do causal work or descriptive work, I need to look at these 4 and say, in which environment have I found myself? Is my environment data poor, or is it data rich? Is my environment theory poor, or is it theory rich? And when we put this together, then I say, okay, it looks like if I'm going to design a research agenda for myself here, it looks like first I have to actually start with description, do a paper, do a publication on that, or do some basic work on that, and then move up to something else, maybe causal study, and so on and so forth. So we need to really recognize where we are, the environment in which we are working. This table, maybe we'll come back to this table down the line, down the road sometime later, but it's a guide, and it's just a way of summarizing something. It's really not like foolproof, don't touch it, don't change it table, no. So we're saying the theory environment of where I work may be either poor or rich. The data environment may also be poor or may also be rich. And there are situations where, fingers are not equal, where the data environment is poor and the theory environment is also poor. Right? So that's that kind of situation we say it is best we start with description to even say, what do we see? For instance, in Nigeria, I will explain very well. At some point, we understood the insurgency in the Northeast. We knew this was mainly religion. So religious explanation, I put theory in quotes, helped us to understand what was going on. We can even predict who the next victims would likely be. There was some kind of understanding there. We had some kind of theory, right? Ethno-religious lenses. We may be wrong, we may be right, but at least it sort of explained things a bit. Then the insurgency, or whatever, I don't know the name, in Katsina began, which is northwest, another part of Nigeria. We just knew people were being killed, tens every day, So who is really killing whom? We don't know. Katsina is heavily mono-religious. The people doing the shooting are also of that religion. So, okay, so now it just didn't make sense. The theory collapses at that point, right? And the data, how many people are being killed, what is their gender, no idea. So I can't go, if I then begin to explain causality in Katsina, it's going to be problematic because we don't even understand the situation. In a situation like that, we want to develop real descriptions, true full descriptions first. But then there are also situations where the theory or existing explanations are good, but then the data environment may be a bit problematic. So we have rich theory environment, but then we have poor data environment. In a situation like that, we need to begin to understand descriptions in different contexts. I'll give you an example. I am from communication studies, so my examples are mostly in that area. There is a lot of work that has been done about how community radio stations promote development. Right. People have looked at how they hold government accountable, how they break hegemony, how they subvert evil things, and so on and so forth. All right. We have read all of that in literature. And the theories seem to explain situations in the places where these stations exist. But for a long, long time, Nigeria did not have a community radio system. Our first community radio stations were approved in 2015. So they are really new. Data about how community radio functions in Nigeria's peculiar situation are rare because they just didn't exist. How would we have studied them? But then global theories and Latin American experiences and all of that exist in literature. Now, I can't begin to talk straight about community radio in Nigeria because we have rich theory elsewhere, but then in our context, we do not have data. So you know what we usually do, you and I usually do, is to borrow these theories, right? And then to try to ground them in the realities that we have found ourselves. Again, very often, it is usually quite descriptive. Then there are situations where the theory environment is weak, but the data environment is rich. And we have a lot of data there, but then we don't have theories that explain them. I am sorry, I'll bring another example from Nigeria. My Kenyan examples have all disappeared. I think it's because typically I start with my first cup of coffee in the day is from Kenya, but today it didn't work out that way. Now, some of us here will know what we call mix in Nigeria. Not only in Nigeria, but we have it all over in some African countries. Mix is multiple indicator cluster surveys. Mix, it's done once in 2 years. And it's done by UNICEF in alliance with Ministry of Health, I think sometimes with Federal Office of Statistics, Federal Bureau of, FOS, FBS. It used to be FOS, yeah. Federal Bureau of Statistics, they come together and then they generate this data. And the data is about literacy rate in Nigeria, infant mortality rate in Nigeria, child mortality rate in Nigeria, maternal mortality rate in Nigeria, life expectancy, all of, you know those things. And you know the kind of stories we read there. They are all songs of sorrow for most of the time. But you see, so we get that once in 2 years. That's data. But who is processing this data to give us broad explanations? we have a poor theory environment, but then we have a rich data environment. I mean, I know somebody can say, but even that data, you can't rely on it. And I say, all right, yeah, let's assume you can't. But then you have not even opened it to see whether it makes sense. So when we have this, we have rich data, but then we don't have theories that make sense of this data. We say, let us explore causality. And on the last day of this module, day four, we are going to be talking about, we'll do more of this kind of table, and we are going to be talking about how we can theorize based on this kind of situation. How do we make, they call it typological theories, how do we theorize in situations where, when we find ourselves in this kind of situation? Lots of data available there. We can plot them on a graph. We can separate them up and down. But then we do not have some broad theoretical explanations that help us to make sense of this data. Then the final one is where we have rich data and rich what? Rich theory environment. Both of them are rich. This is where we can choose to test what they call causal hypothesis. We have very nice theory, we have very nice data, but then now we want to test further what they call causal hypothesis. Again, this is like a foreshadow. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about research questions and hypothesis, and we are going to deal with this a lot more. Now, as I said, this is just an attempt to make sense of, to help us begin to think about the environment in which we have found ourselves. It is possible that right now you are still thinking, am I here? Am I there? Am I here? Am I there? It's okay. The more we think about your concept notes, the clearer these things are going to be. Yes, Valence.
Yeah, I'm wondering how to measure the richness of theory. Is it the number of theories
that exists? Okay, good.
The quality of the theories?
Good. How do you measure the richness or otherwise of a theory environment? Yeah. Did he answer a question that was bothering all of us? And why didn't you talk? Yeah, how do you measure the richness of a theory environment? How do you know this environment, the theory is rich or the theory is poor? Maybe we don't have problem with measuring data in terms of availability, rich or poor, but then theory, how do you? Yes, I'm still trying to learn people's name. Crispin. Yes, Crispin.
Earlier on, we were told that you need to find the background to the study, where we have to research to find out what others have done in that and that process of reading the literature and surfing the literature in order to find out that what I wanted to do is not
done. Yeah, perfect. I think
that process, that's when you encounter.
Perfect. Let's just imagine, I mean, we all are adults now. Let's imagine the time that new media came, I mean, really hit us. You could search for, new media and educational performance. And Google will say, we do not have any item for your, yeah? Yeah, it was new. Literature was little. And when we say theory, let us remember we're not saying like a big theory that has a name to it. Theory, generally speaking, are existing explanations for a phenomenon. So it is difficult to say if you find X publications, then if that is all you can find, then theory is poor. Until you find X plus 1, then theory is rich. No, we cannot do that. But you will have to use your understanding of the discipline to say, okay, I think I have a robust body of explanation for this phenomenon that I am studying. It's difficult to prescribe a fixed number of studies or theories that exist there. But there would be questions where to even find a very good reading would be difficult. Yeah. Yes, Edwin.
I'm noticing, it's sort of like implied the richness of data has something to do with how quantitative.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so let's, we should also think about that. When we say data, I know, traditionally, our minds go to, figures, with charts, and even I am also guilty. The example I gave is almost all quantitative. Yeah, but we know that we really need to come out of that explanation. Yeah, data is not only in numbers. Yeah, so so when we talk of richness of data environment, it is both quantitative and qualitative. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Using your example, that is the richness or poverty of
Data poverty.
Well, I'm talking of the theory.
Okay.
You made mention of the fact that in the Northeast, sorry for Nigerians, you understand easily. We were trying to explain the crisis or the instability there based on ethno-religious explanations. But at the end of the day, when the same people were killing each other, we are not able to now use that theory to explain.
Okay.
I think that shows the poverty.
It became grossly inadequate. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Again, which is, as we all know, even theory itself is not static. I mean, theory is just a body of explanations. It grows, but it also wanes. Yeah. So let's move on to talking about why do we need to focus on causality. Now we've been saying descriptive and causal. Now we want to begin to zero down on what really what our attention will be around for this training, and it's on causal studies. This is one guy you will read a number of times. He says, we wish to know not only what happened, but also perhaps more critically, why these things happen. And I have discovered that even when Nigerians ask questions of what, and Africans generally, they are really sometimes asking questions of why. When I suddenly run into a traffic where there should be no traffic, my question is always, what is the problem? But am I simply interested in knowing what the problem is? No. I'm also interested in knowing how am I going to get out of here. What is going to cause me to get out of here? So in other words, at the back of that what is the problem description is the intention to understand causation. What is going to get me out? How? So we'll talk about the how questions sometime later. So he says we wish to know not only what happened, but perhaps more critically, why these things happen. That we are only interested in causal argument. But that is Gering. Why do you think we want to pay more attention to causal work in research? We have said, because we've been doing descriptive work. Yeah, I agree. But then that is not the only reason. Why should we bother about causation as researchers? Yes, Haruna.
If we know the cause, I think we can go close to the solution.
Okay.
But when it is just described, I think we are still stuck.
Okay. So understanding causation makes it possible for us to make recommendations for the solution of a problem. Okay, good one. Perfect. Any other? Yeah, okay. So we can prevent, if it's a problem, then we can prevent further recurrence of that problem. Yes.
I think
Irene?
somehow related to Karuna's, if you get to the root cause, then you are able to eliminate the factors that may be confounding, not necessarily that important,
okay.
but you channel your resources.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. I need to warn you, Irene, that many people will think you are a Nigerian from Delta State. Irene Yamu or from Edo State. Yeah.
I will speak the language.
You have to learn quickly. Yeah. So good. Yes. Kechi.
So many things might actually cause something.
That's true.
Now we start talking about you want to correct some impression, if some researcher has said this caused this, other researcher might research on that and now counter it that it is not this but this. It helps to, focus on the real cause.
Okay, we're able to focus on the real cause. Yes. Yeah, beautiful. Finally.
Okay. When we are able to describe the cause, we are also able to identify like the parties, the agents, and all the interacting factors that are actually causing or compounding the issue. So we are able to identify each of them.
Okay.
Like the video we watched, if we are able to find the cause, maybe the drilling or the query or something, then we know, okay, men are here, women are here, this is the government's, what do you call it, contribution to this etc. But we have to start from.
Okay, so focusing on causation can help us to have a comprehensive understanding of a situation. Yeah, perfect. These are all captured here. We are able to understand our social world better if we understand causation. Sometimes, as we'll see later, sometimes because we don't know the nature of causes, then we end up blaming the wrong person for some action. We are also able to hold people and institutions accountable. Ronke was saying, so we see the part that government has played, the role that some other people have played, and so on and so forth. So we can hold government and others accountable to their action. Because we know what really caused what, meaning that we are also able to exonerate others and let them, as we will see later in the one of the famous stories that we have read. Importantly, and this is echoing what Haruna said and what Irene said and what Nkechi also said, that when we focus on causality in research, we are able to provide a basis for well-informed policy actions to address social problems. I think of those NGOs that go to Dandora. That's a lot of work, a lot of boldness. I have been to Dandora to do field work, and when we were going, we had to be escorted by armed policemen. There was no other, when we were going to the dump. But the dump had become a big city on its own. So the dump also had its schools, its clinics, and when I was going to do observation in the clinic, there was no need to go with the policeman. But when we were going to the dump itself, that the clinic served, it was not, PASGR didn't want to take the risk. Now, I'm thinking of those NGOs going there to talk about sexual education and family planning and all of those. Sometimes I wonder, how did they get to the conclusion that this is what is needed at this moment in this context? They must have thought, taking some critical thinking and maybe causal analysis, or else then it would just be, they say we should do this intervention and we are just doing it. And sometimes government intervention is just like that. Here are people without water, without anything, and then you say, okay, so my people, what we have promised you to do, we are going to do it. And then what you are doing is to buy a car for the traditional ruler. Now, but people don't have water to drink. The schools are leaking. People are sitting on the floor. Is that it? But I think but if we are don't have a very firm hold on causation, it's difficult to actually influence policy. We'll be saying, well, it looks like, and again, we'll come back to this a bit later to see how our wrong understanding of causes may have misled us in the past into just throwing resources in the very wrong direction. So essentially, we're saying doing causality has to do with focusing on what really matters. And focusing on what really matters we follow, we only happen if we identify what it is. So it's about saying what is that one thing or that one combination of things that is responsible for this situation. That is asking these very key questions, and we'll return to that tomorrow morning. But now we want to move forward, by talking a bit more about this nature of a cause. Many times we don't understand what really is going on. You think back, and sometimes you are just sorry for decisions you took because something happens, Something happened, and then you are late for work, and then you are trying to hurry out, and then you hit something, and then you trip. Now, I begin to blame the person who put that something there, right? Yeah. Right. But is it fair to put all the blame on that person?
Yes.
Huh? Yes, Dio.
Yeah, because if you weren't in a hurry.
If I wasn't in a hurry, I probably would have noticed it and pushed it one side. Even play football with it, Some people put something there the other day, your son did it or your daughter, and you say, hey, you put this here, you kick, and then she kicks back, and it became fun. Now she has done it today. And then, so here we're saying, we may think this is the cause, but then, if we understand the nature of causes very well, we understand this really, really, really is something else. Not the cause. And we'll take up this later. But I'm saying it's worth our effort to even think about to try to define what a cause is. Because that is what we're going to be blaming for whatever happens. Right. So how do you define a cause? This is a very common word. If somebody say, define a cause, what would you say a cause is? Yeah, somebody can say, a cause is something that causes something. I hear that a lot. In my basic reading classes, I always started with students. Define reading. They say reading is the process of reading books, journals, anything. Yeah. So we keep going around. Huh? You were going to say something, Valence. You want to define a cause?
I was trying to look at the Dandora issue.
Okay, good.
And I was looking at the way the residents in that area are hostile, and the situation around the area. And I was trying to look at the root cause being the industries that dump the garbage there. So if you can actually have a policy to stop them, the other people will sort themselves. Because the garbage will not be there and they will not go for it to come their way.
Yeah, okay, I agree with you. So the cause of this problem, according to you, industries that are dumping refuse, the cause is not that somebody who should have provided a place for the industry refused to provide. That's not the cause, right? We'll see a table soon where we say, look, really, where do you... Yeah, because the industry people will say, look, this is even too far from our factory. We don't like coming here. If we had something else, we'll go there. Then we'll say, why didn't you provide something else? Then we'll say, I didn't provide because, and then, so that is another thing. But now, let's just pause this conversation because it's coming up in 2 or 3 slides. Huh? But how would you define a cause? Let's take a look at this image. What do we see here? Let's call this Bobby Jack. What do you see? What's this?
Broken glass.
Okay. What does this look like? And these are like the pieces of the... Yeah, some must have fallen inside, I guess. Some outside. If we look at this, maybe it helps us to understand what a cause is. So here we would say... sorry, no, not yet. We would say... we'll represent cause with this letter X, just to represent it. There is nothing like, okay, so it must be X. There is really no reason why we're using X. And we will represent this thing that has happened as Y. Now we know that this Bobby Jack, no matter what he did, if this was not there, maybe there is a very high chance that this story would have been different. Either he would have used his head, in which case we'll find him stuck here, or he would have found fun elsewhere. Because I suspect that this happened when he was playing football. Let's say football. He looks really sorry about it. But what can we do? What has been done cannot be undone. Now, but let's see how this helps us to define a cause. So we say a cause, which we can also call a causal factor or an X factor. Then we say a Y is something we call an outcome or an outcome factor. Some we call it dependent variable. So others we call this independent variable. People from quantitative backgrounds like to use these terms. Some other people, when they hear dependent variable, independent variable, they need to take a few seconds to say, okay, yeah, now, how did they explain it? And almost every time they hear that, they have to do that quick, travel back to year one, and then travel back immediately. So it is not easy. For some, it is so very easy for others. Now, because we say, we are from different backgrounds, we want to carry everybody along. So we can, if independent variable is what works for you, that's fine. But if you prefer to say cause, just simple English, cause is, we call it X, this we call Y. Now we're saying, very often in between a cause and what it produces, there is something else. There is a road, there is a chain of events that is connecting them. And we are saying that is also very key for our overall understanding of causation. Now, with this in mind, all of that, all of those were represented here as well. Yeah. Now, let's now try to see how we would define a cause. So we're saying, to say X is a cause of an outcome called Y. Okay. This one?
I just wanted to check that the Z factor is the mechanism.
Yes. Yeah, so it's the road or the chain or whatever that I say is between the X and the Y. Yes. Okay. And we will really hammer on this as we move on because it is very crucial to our understanding of causation. Okay. So to say X, for instance, hunger is the cause of Y. For instance, fainting, These examples, I'm using it to tell you something. I didn't eat anything at lunch, at break time, and now you understand the example, where it is coming from. Okay, so to say hunger is the cause of Y, fainting, is to say that if we do something about hunger, like if now you don't have. If you have one small cake and you throw it to this hungry man, that it is also going to have something, some kind of, on fainting. Yes. Now, in other words, if we flip it, if you keep giving this man food and he still keeps fainting every day, then we are going to, what conclusion are we going to reach? That is the reason he's fainting is not hunger. It may be village people following him, as they say in Nigeria, or something. Yeah, or something else. So we're saying, to say hunger is the cause of fainting, we're saying if we adjust hunger, or if we remove hunger, or if we increase hunger, something else will happen to fainting. You increase hunger, this man will just die forever, or something. And we're saying, this kind of change, this kind of change, when we do something to hunger and the change is felt in fainting, is not magic. That we're saying we should be able to trace a connection between what we have done and what has happened to hunger. And that connection, for want of some better name to call it, we just call it Z. That change occurs through Z. And that if we really want to fully understand this situation, if we really want to understand it, we need to pretend. We need to pretend that X was not even there. Then we'll be able to understand how important X is in generating or influencing Y. We need to imagine what Y fainting would have been if X hunger were not there. The more we appreciate what would have happened, the better we'll appreciate the role that X is playing in ensuring Y or in producing Y. So now, if I want to understand how N power, that 10,000 naira, is influencing people's business, I need to go and see what their business would have been without N power. If the business would still have been the same, it would still have been the same 2 for 5 naira oranges, 2 for 5 naira. You know how do we say it in Nigeria? You know, in Yoruba land, they say ice water tutu, meaning cold ice water. And people wonder, are there hot ice water? You know, people who sell this thing. Now, but so if I can say that the businesses of these people will still have remained the same, even if they didn't get M power, then I can conclude that M power was not a cause to the growth of their business. So if I see these 10 people who got M power, their business have grown, and I can link this 10,000 naira to the growth, that link is really where the hard work is. Then I can say N power produced that. Otherwise, then M power, 10,000 naira, is not the cause of business prosperity. Does this make some sketchy sense? Are this tentative? Yeah, some tentative sense. Yes, Ngozi? Okay, no, it's usually sometimes like this. So there is no, just smile. I mean, you'll be okay. So now this is what we're saying. I was just using the N power to explain. Recently, our government started giving small amounts of money to business people. They understand that when this money is big and it's given through the banks and you have to fill all the forms and you have to bring all the sureties, they claim that the very poor people on the road selling cola nuts will not get that money. And I think maybe that is true. So the vice president himself went out and was, I don't know whether I was distributing. Trader money. Thank you. This is how we know who collected what. Trader money. Trader. You know trader and you know money. Yeah, so they call it trader money. Thank you very much, Rahila. So now, this is what we're saying. 5 people collected M power, or some people collected M power. Trader money. They collected trader money. Now, you know, recently the vice president said, "Oh, those who collected this money are doing well with their business." That's a very political statement, you know. Now, let's say they are doing well. Let's say their business has increased. So we say, the vice president is saying, trader money is the cause, business growth is the outcome. In our language, trader money is the X, business growth is the Y. And for that to be right, we are saying, number one, it must be that if we increase trader money, this business growth will also increase. That is one way of saying, indeed, X, trader money is leading to growth. Then we are also saying, for us to capture this thing very well, we have to imagine what the reality of trader money would have been without, the reality of business growth would have been without trader money. If our conclusion is that, without this trader money, these people's business would have reached the floor, then we say trader money is indeed very good. It has helped. So X increases, Y increases. Yes, Y will not have increased without the X. Yes. If we have yes on those two notes, oh yeah, good. That imagination, you know that we are dealing with people who have trader money. That pretending to see what would have happened if X was not there is called the counterfactual condition. It is called the what if condition. What if condition. And if you remember, Sloman says, actually a good part of our life is run based on counterfactual understanding. So I get to my house and I see this is my bed, and I went down, and I am fine. He said that you will appreciate the meaning of bed. If you imagine what would have happened if in your absence somebody has removed that bed and you go down like that, say you will thank God for a bed more. Right? He said, so if you want to understand how good something is, how strong an X is, how powerful it is or it is not, let us imagine that it was not there. He said that imagination, they call it counterfactual condition. Now this is very general. This is still flying out there. As we move on, also in the electives, we will see how all of these then find their way into the way we understand and explain causation, for instance. They are the principles behind the pure experimental studies that we do. They are the principles behind quasi-experimental studies that we do. They are the principles behind things like even causal, even ethnographic work that we do. If we understand the principle of causation very well, we are going to be able to understand and even deepen how these things work.